FIFA is a non-profit organization. Let that sentence sit for a moment because it is going to reframe everything you're about to hear. A non-profit, the same legal status as a hospital charity, a food bank, a community foundation. And while you were watching the most viewed sporting event in human history, over 5 billion people tuned in for Qatar 2022, this particular nonprofit generated $7.57 billion in revenue over a single 4-year cycle. The country that hosted the party spent $229 billion building stadiums, metro lines, hotel towers, airports, and essentially an entire modern nation from scratch. FIFA walked away with a record-breaking financial surplus. Qatar walked away with a bill larger than the gross domestic product of more than 130 countries on Earth. Buried inside that arrangement, buried very carefully inside Swiss law and host city contracts and decades of normalized corruption, is a financial architecture so perfectly one-sided that the phrase "beautiful game" starts to sound like a threat. Stay with me, because the further we go into this, the worse it gets. And somewhere around the midpoint, I am going to introduce you to a man who lived in Trump Tower, expensed his cats to a football federation, wore a wire for the FBI at the World Cup, and accidentally brought the whole thing crashing down. FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, was founded in Paris in 1904. 7 countries, 1 set of rules, 1 governing body for a sport that was spreading faster than any single nation could contain. Those founding members probably had no idea what they were building, because today FIFA has 211 member associations. The United Nations has 193. FIFA has more member states than the international body that governs nuclear weapons treaties, global health policy, and war crimes prosecution. That gap is not a quirk, that gap is a power base. Every 4 years, FIFA runs the World Cup. The bidding process is expensive and brutal. The hosting itself is more expensive. And the financial return for the host country is almost always negative. Research shows that 12 of the last 14 World Cups hosted since 1966 resulted in financial losses for the host country. The last 3 tournaments averaged a return on investment of minus 31%. Not zero, not break even, minus 31%. That gap is not a quirk. That gap is a power base. 211 member associations versus 193 UN member states means FIFA holds more sovereign sway than the body governing nuclear weapons. Every 4 years, FIFA runs the World Cup, the most watched sporting event in human history, a temporary global economy that reshapes host nations for a single month. Dozens of nations compete for the right to host it, some desperately, some illegally. The bidding process is an expensive, brutal scramble where promises are made and ethics often take a back seat. The bidding itself is brutal and expensive. The hosting is even more so. Countries pour billions into stadiums, infrastructure, and security, often borrowing heavily to meet FIFA's demands. And the financial return for the host country? Almost always negative. The promised economic windfall rarely materializes, leaving behind debt and underused infrastructure. Research shows that 12 of the last 14 World Cups hosted since 1966 resulted in financial losses for the host country. The pattern is not an exception, it is the rule. The last 3 tournaments averaged a return on investment of negative 31%. Not break even. Not a small loss. Nearly a third of the investment simply vanished. So why do countries keep bidding? The answer is coming. It involves a calculus that goes far beyond spreadsheets and into the realm of national pride, geopolitical ambition, and a fear of being left behind. But before I get there, let me introduce the subplot. Because every great financial scandal has a human face that makes the abstract real, and this one has a face you will not forget. His name is Chuck Blazer. He was American, large, disheveled, and catastrophically careless with other people's money, a man whose financial habits would make an auditor weep. He was beloved by everyone who wanted something from him, and in the world of FIFA, where votes and contracts were traded like currency, that made him a very popular man indeed. Blazer served simultaneously as General Secretary of CONCACAF, the confederation running football across North America, Central America, and the Caribbean, and as a member of the FIFA Executive Committee. As a member of FIFA's Executive Committee, he cast votes that decided which nations would host the World Cup. He maintained 2 separate apartments in Trump Tower, Manhattan, one for himself and a second one for his cats. He charged both apartments as business expenses to the football federation he ran, CONCACAF. He once submitted a $10,000 Christmas tree as a business expense to the Federation. For years, he sat at the exact center of the machine that decided who got the tournament, the broadcast contracts, and the quiet payments. We will come back to Chuck. But first, I need to show you the machine itself. To understand FIFA's economics, you need to understand what FIFA is actually selling. And it is selling scarcity. There is one World Cup. It happens once every 4 years. Approximately 5 billion people want to watch it. That single fact makes it the most commercially powerful recurring event in human history. The 2022 final between Argentina and France drew 1.5 billion viewers alone, making it the most watched match ever played. That final drew more viewers than the Super Bowl, the Olympics opening ceremony, and the Champions League final combined. Every broadcaster in every territory on Earth needs it. Every sponsor on the planet wants their logo beside it. And every government that thinks hosting it will elevate their nation's global standing will pay almost anything to be chosen. FIFA generated $7.57 billion in revenue from the Qatar 2022 World Cup during the 2019-2022 cycle, breaking the previous record of $642 billion from Russia 2018. Broadcasting rights accounted for $3.43 billion, representing 45% of total revenue. Marketing and sponsorships contributed $180 billion. Ticket sales and hospitality added another $929 million. Licensing rights, the Panini sticker books, the official branded merchandise, the digital collectibles FIFA launched on blockchain, brought in $769 million more, all of it flowing to one organization registered as a nonprofit. FIFA's World Cup year revenue in 2022 was $577 billion. That is 21.6 times its lowest year in the same period. $267 million in 2020, a pandemic-hit non-World Cup year. This extreme cyclicality is structural. Most revenue is recognized in the tournament year. FIFA does not produce a product continuously. It produces one product every 4 years, and it has made that product so valuable that the 4-year wait only increases demand. FIFA projects the 2026 World Cup will generate between $11 and $13 billion in revenue, a staggering leap that nearly doubles the take from Qatar. The 2026 tournament expands to 48 teams and 104 matches, spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The first World Cup hosted by 3 nations. Broadcasting rights alone will bring in $4.264 billion, a 43% increase from Qatar 2022, as networks scramble for a piece of the action. FIFA did not invent a new product or discover new markets. It simply made the old product bigger. More teams, more matches, more inventory to sell. The machine scales effortlessly, but the costs scale only on one side, the host side. FIFA's balance sheet grows while cities absorb the risk. Each of the 16 host cities across North America faces between $100 and $200 million in costs for infrastructure, security, and logistics. Host cities must provide FIFA with free office space, equipped to FIFA's exact specifications, at no charge, a hidden subsidy buried in the contract. If you want to understand how money really flows through history, hit subscribe and follow the golden thread. We're just getting to the good part. Every host city must exempt sales tax from World Cup ticket prices, meaning millions in revenue that would fund schools or roads vanishes. Florida expects to lose around $7.4 million in sales tax revenue from games played in Miami alone, money that would otherwise support public services. Georgia stands to lose up to $25 million in state and local sales taxes on World Cup games played in Atlanta, a gap that hits education budgets hardest. Kansas City expects to lose roughly $11 million in sales tax revenue from 6 matches at Arrowhead Stadium, revenue that would fund public education and healthcare. Revenue that would otherwise fund public education and healthcare, lost to a tax exemption the city never agreed to until the contract was already signed. As one economist put it, none of the host cities will benefit economically from the World Cup because they do not get the revenue, but they do get the costs, which can run well over $100 million. New York City's own fiscal watchdog estimated that even if FIFA's prediction of 1.2 million regional visitors fully materialized, the additional tax revenue would be no more than $55 million, while the city is on track to spend roughly $70 million in added costs for the NYPD, emergency management, and small business support, a guaranteed loss in the optimistic scenario. That is a guaranteed loss in the optimistic scenario. If visitor numbers fall short, the gap only widens. Meanwhile, FIFA requires a full tax exemption for itself and its related entities across the duration of the tournament, including exemptions from income tax on broadcasting revenues and commercial rights income generated within the host countries. exempt from income tax on broadcasting revenues and commercial rights income generated within the host countries, revenues projected to make 2026 the most commercially profitable World Cup in history. In effect, the public sector waives tax revenues while FIFA keeps the commercial upside. In a few minutes, I want to show you the exact legal mechanism that makes this extraction permanent and nearly irreversible. But first, let me show you what happens to the host country's economy once the tournament ends and the cameras leave, because that is where the real accounting begins. Here is a thought experiment. You are running a country. Your economy is developing, your global reputation is modest, infrastructure is aging, jobs are scarce, and someone arrives and says, "We can put your country on television in front of 5 billion people for an entire month." That offer is almost impossible to refuse. That offer is almost impossible to refuse. FIFA knows this and has structured the entire bidding process to exploit it. The pre-tournament promise is always the same. Consultants produce reports, government boosters hold press conferences, projected GDP boosts are announced, tourism will surge, jobs will be created, the country will emerge permanently transformed. These projections are, to use the technically economic term, wildly optimistic. Economists Robert Baade and Victor Matheson estimated that the economic impact of the World Cup fell between $5.50 billion and $930 billion short of pre-tournament projections, a cumulative pattern across host cities. Qatar spent about $200 billion when it hosted the 2022 tournament, while Russia spent around $16 billion in 2018, Brazil spent $1970 billion in 2014, and South Africa approximately $720 billion in 2010. None of those governments recovered their investment from World Cup economics alone. Several were left with something economists have given a name: the white elephant. Less than 5 years after being built for the World Cup, the $600 million Cape Town Stadium was largely abandoned. It had been available for private functions, birthday parties, weddings, anniversaries. The 60,000-seat waterfront stadium was losing between $6 and $10 million annually. The stadium costs were further inflated by hundreds of millions of dollars because FIFA refused to allow some South African cities, including Cape Town and Durban, to use their existing stadiums. FIFA, it turns out, insisted on spectacular new venues because spectacular venues look better on television. The global broadcast audience is FIFA's product. The host country's existing infrastructure is secondary to what the cameras see. The global broadcast audience is FIFA's product. The host country's existing infrastructure is secondary to what the cameras see. This is the gilded thread. The asset owner captures the returns. Everyone who makes the asset possible absorbs the risk. The Peter Mokaba Stadium in Polokwane was built to hold over 40,000 spectators. Polokwane is a rural city of just over 500,000 people. It hosted 4 matches during the 2010 tournament. Polokwane lacks a top-tier local football team. Maintenance costs running into millions annually represent a significant financial burden on local authorities. The same country where 40% of the population was unemployed at the time of the tournament was now maintaining a 40,000-seat stadium that hosted weddings and the occasional concert. Brazil's 2014 tournament cost around $15 billion. Several stadiums were underused after the event. 4 cities where arenas were constructed for the 2014 World Cup, Manaus, Cuiabá, Natal, and Brasilia, had no major football teams active in relevant leagues. A Reuters report found that the 12 stadiums used in the 2014 World Cup cost 50% more than planned. Only 6 of the 35 promised public transportation projects were finished on time. The transportation projects that were supposed to benefit ordinary Brazilians were abandoned. The stadiums sat half empty. The money was gone. FIFA's ledger showed a healthy surplus. This is not bad luck or poor planning. This is what the deal was always going to produce, and nobody understood that better than the people who actually ran it. Now, back to Chuck Blazer, the American who sat at the center of FIFA's machine, living in Trump Tower and expensing his cats to the football federation he ran. In 2011, the Internal Revenue Service was auditing Chuck Blazer's personal tax records, not because they suspected football corruption, but because the man had simply stopped paying his taxes for years. The IRS investigation attracted the attention of the FBI, which had been separately working on an unrelated case involving Russian organized crime, and had begun following leads into potential corruption in the bidding processes for Russia 2018 and Qatar 2022. The FBI joined its investigation with the IRS's, coordinating with police agencies and diplomats in 33 countries to uncover a widespread international case of bribery and kickbacks, all linked to FIFA officials. When federal agents sat across from Blazer and laid out what they knew, he made a calculation. He cooperated. He became an informant. He wore recording devices to FIFA meetings and events. The man who had spent decades inside the machine agreed to help dismantle it in exchange for avoiding prison. And what he told prosecutors was not surprising to anyone who had been paying attention. It was only surprising in scale and duration. The Justice Department documented over $150 million in bribes and kickbacks paid to FIFA officials. Investigators found that American banks had been used in the process, allowing prosecutors to bring the case to American courts. These payments did not include millions of dollars in other possible bribes paid outside of American banks. The scale was vast, and the jurisdiction was built on the bank's role. Blazer provided details about the bribery, including a $10 million bribe paid by the South African government to host the 2010 World Cup. The investigation found evidence of bribery dating back to the 1990s. Decades of systematic corruption running continuously, while 5 billion people watched the matches and assumed the tournament was simply a celebration of sport. Decades of systematic corruption ran continuously, unchecked, while 5 billion people watched the matches and assumed the tournament was simply a celebration of sport. More than 24 FIFA officials and their associates were implicated in a 24-year self-enrichment scheme that reached the highest levels of FIFA management. Central to the scandal were accusations of bribery connected to the awarding of hosting rights for the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 World Cup to Qatar. In May 2011, the Sunday Times published claims that the then president of the African Football Confederation had, along with a fellow executive committee member, accepted $1.5 million in bribes from Qatar to secure their support for the 2022 bid. Court documents later revealed systematic transfers from the Qatar National Bank directly to committee members who held voting power over the host selection. Documents indicated that the largest payments alleged to have been made went to Vitaly Mutko, Russia's then Minister for Sport, who was alleged to have received payments totaling more than $100 million in combined payments. An initial $72.60 million transfer was allegedly made in 2009, followed by a $34 million transfer after the December 2010 voting to choose the World Cup 2022 host. $34 million wired after the vote. The timing makes the architecture clear. Now, let me take you to the morning that almost nobody saw coming, even though it had been building for years. May 27, 2015, the Bauer au Lac Hotel in Zurich, Switzerland, one of the finest hotels in the country, built on the shores of Lake Zurich, with views that cost more per night than some people earn in a month. FIFA officials are in town for the annual FIFA Congress. Senior executives are checked in, and at approximately 6,000 in the morning, Swiss police, acting on behalf of the United States Department of Justice, enter the building and knock on doors. 7 FIFA officials are arrested in their hotel rooms. That same day, simultaneous raids at FIFA's headquarters in Zurich. Physical records, electronic files, seized. Swiss officials, operating under information from the United States Department of Justice, arrested many senior FIFA officials in Zurich and seized physical and electronic records from FIFA's main headquarters. The charges were filed under the RICO Act, the same legal framework designed for the mafia. Prosecutors were essentially arguing that FIFA's leadership had functioned as an organized crime enterprise, systematically monetizing its control over the most valuable sporting property on earth through bribery, fraud, and money laundering. For more than 2 decades inside a nonprofit. Mafia law, the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, was now applied to FIFA's leadership. The indictment painted a picture of a 24-year self-enrichment scheme that reached the highest levels of FIFA management. Central to the scandal were accusations of bribery connected to the awarding of hosting rights for the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 World Cup to Qatar. 2 days after the arrests at the Bora Olak Hotel, FIFA held its scheduled presidential election. The world watched in disbelief. The organization that had just seen 7 of its senior officials arrested in coordinated raids was proceeding with business as usual. The vote would go ahead, as planned, as if nothing had happened. Sepp Blatter was re-elected by a nearly 2/3 majority of the FIFA Congress. The corruption scandal and public outcry that followed the arrest did not stop him. He received 133 of the 209 votes cast. The man who had presided over the organization for 17 years was given a 5th term, even as federal agents in Zurich and the United States continued to build their case. In the days that followed, as the scandal escalated and public outrage grew, Blatter called for a special session of the FIFA Congress and vowed to resign once the Congress elected his successor. He then claimed in a statement that would live forever in the Museum of Self-Delusion that he felt not everybody was behind him. At the peak of his time with FIFA, Sepp Blatter's annual salary was $6 million. He also had the ability to earn generous bonuses, After the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, he reportedly earned a $12 million bonus. He was also allowed to live in a luxurious Zurich apartment at FIFA's expense, from a non-profit. Later, even the former head of FIFA called the selection of Qatar a mistake. It was a bad choice, and I was responsible for that as president at the time, said Sepp Blatter, whose term as FIFA administrator ended in 2015 amid a bribery scandal. He said this in 2022, 12 years after the vote. Billions of dollars spent, thousands of workers dead. Yep, he said that. Now, I need to talk about those workers, because any accounting of the World Cup's economics that skips this part is not an accounting at all. It is a press release. Qatar's $229 billion transformation project required labor, enormous quantities of it. Qatar is a country of 2.9 million people, of whom only 300,000 are citizens. The rest are expatriates and migrant workers. The host nation for the most watched sporting event in history had a native population smaller than the city of Cleveland. According to Amnesty International, migrant workers account for 90% of Qatar's total workforce. These workers from Nepal, Bangladesh, India, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Kenya arrived under what was called the kafala system. Under kafala, a worker's ability to change employers or even leave the country was legally controlled by their sponsor. Workers must have a sponsor who retains power over whether they can change jobs or even leave the country.